That beat is just catchy sometimes. I'm feeling it today more than other days.
Every time.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another sode here with us at the Around the 4-2 Fantasy Football Show. We got Joe Frick. We got Drew in his office. We can call it a different space this week. And I said literally right before we started recording that number is looking more faded than Joe Frick at a wedding. And I stand by that statement.
Champagne Poppy.
No, but what's going on, boys?
Hey, not
how we feeling?
Doing all right.
Joe, I said I was going to bring something up. I had a lot of people telling me I had to bring it up. What happened in that fantasy football matchup? Are you holding a grudge against Tyler Lockett? Will you draft him next year? I mean, what's the process moving? Are you somebody that holds fantasy football grudges?
I don't hold grudges.
Okay.
Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice. It's probably your offensive coordinator. It wasn't really your fault. So I was down by like 3.2 points going into the Monday night game. It's a 14-team league, so spots were pretty tough. I mean, if you looked at my roster, I think I sent it to y'all. I had like random people starting. I had Devonta Freeman and Booker from the Giants starting as my running backs for. And then it was like, all right, like going into Monday night, I'm down 3. I've got Lockett going against a softer defense, like. Hasn't been lighting it up, but surely we can get 3. You see the big play from Metcalf, like 5 plays into the game. You're like, all right, like 3 points, definitely doable. And Yahoo had me at like a 95% chance of winning at the start of the game, and you just watch
the
percentage just slip and slip and slip and slip. So I ended up losing by like 0.7 points, which is tough to see. But hey,
you know what? I'm glad that you brought up Metcalf because Lattimore was shadowing him. So it's like you would think that Lockett would have been the guy yesterday.
Swain randomly became the guy.
Freddie Swain. Oh, man. And then we don't have to talk about it, but I did beat Drew in our Dynasty League. So just wanted to say that.
Didn't you also get Manager of the Week, too? Like the double whammy?
He's got it at 6 out of 7 weeks.
Dude, my receivers, though, are stupid. Like, I did not anticipate this when I drafted that team. When you have Cooper Kupp and Jamar Chase as your 1-2, I'm getting Amari Cooper back from bye this week as well to be my flex, one of my flexes. But, yeah, I mean, hey, things are trending, especially with Joe Burrow playing the way that he has. And then, listen, if one of Lawrence or Zach Wilson pan out, I'm looking pretty good going forward. And Lawrence has been pretty good the last few weeks.
He's definitely stepped up, and they're letting him run the ball more, which, I mean, from a fantasy football perspective, it gives you such a good floor as a quarterback. Like, look at Jalen Hurts. He might be the worst quarterback of all time, but amazing at fantasy football. I just saw a stat the other day. He's getting 43% of his points in the fourth quarter. So he's like the garbage time king. What'll be interesting is that you have Philly and Detroit, and Swift has also been a garbage time king. So it's like, who's going to prevail out of those two? It'll be a fun week.
Okay, fellas, I just want to run through these names. We can talk about them. So injury COVID here, and we should have probably been incorporating COVID into this. But when you have a name like Devontae Adams pop up in this, now we really got to talk about this. Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard on the COVID list for the Packers 2 days before their game against Arizona. We can start there. I feel like we can just talk about those two separately than everybody else because what does this mean for the Packers? It's obviously a very tough matchup going against the only undefeated team left in football. Does this hamper your expectations for Aaron Rodgers? I mean, I know that we have him in you see the top 10 rankings at the bottom here. He comes in at number 9. What are you expecting from Aaron Rodgers without both of those guys?
My mind says, like, all right, like he literally has nothing going on. Like, there's no way. What's up, Stone? Congrats on that. Have not really felt that
because of this show. Hey, let everybody know that it's literally because of this show. Make sure you get the word out.
I have a team that's 1-6 because of this show, but we're not going to talk about it. Thank you, Allen Robinson. But I was not high on Rodgers going into the week. My mind says, all right, you're missing your top option. Aaron Jones is in this weird timeshare now, and Arizona's been dominant like all across the ball. So like, what are they going to do? My heart says, like, this is a perfect scenario that, like, Aaron Rodgers says F it and just has, like, the game of his life. And, like, they win by 10. But I'm going to stick to my guns here and say that he was out of my top 10 this week.
He was out of mine. That's why I was wondering why he came in. I noticed Drew has him at 4, and I was like, how did he sneak to our top 10 if 2 of us didn't have him there?
Drew really liked him this week. So let's hear what you got, Drew.
So I just think that this game's going to be a crazy shootout. But that was also pre-Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard. I just think that this week Aaron Jones is just going to go off. I just have a good
Yeah.
feeling. I'd be shocked if he just goes for 3 touchdowns out of nowhere. AJ Dillon gets a touchdown. I think it's going to be high scoring. So
Drew,
that's
you're ruining my prop bets for the Platts picks net right now. What is
Get
this?
them on. Get the shades on. Put on the shades, Drew.
I just
well, this is a good question actually. While we're on the subject, let's get down to brass tacks. Rodgers or Herbert this week? I assume Herbert. I mean, full complement of receivers here. I think it's more of a discussion. Without Devontae Adams, without Allen Lazard, I don't think it is much of one, to be honest with you.
No, absolutely. And I think what's interesting about New England is that they've been pretty soft against passing this year. They're giving up
just not tight ends.
Just not tight ends, right? But the way that they operate, they try to take out the best player in the offense. So who do you think that's going to be this week? Is it going to be Eckler? Is it going to be Keenan Allen? Is it going to be Mike Williams, who's kind of having the season of his life? Like, who knows? There's just too many options for me and not enough for Green Bay.
Wait, never mind. Hold on. Sarge is playing me. I would definitely, like I've been saying on this show so far, go with Aaron Rodgers. I think
is Sam Darnold available in your league?
I think that Thursday just seems like a smash spot for Aaron Rodgers against the soft Cardinals defense. I think they're overperforming this year. I'm going Rodgers between those two.
He should stream Rodgers.
No, but you look at Austin Eckler. I think that's the guy, honestly. Patriots giving up the 7th most points to fantasy running backs. We can talk about Eckler a little bit more. Hold on. Let's see where he comes in on the Fricker ticker, by the way. Oh, that's right. RB3. So I think that Eckler is in a really smash spot here against New England. But yeah, I was just curious what you guys thought about Rodgers' fantasy implications there, because I think that if you have Aaron Rodgers, I mean, unless you're in a situation where, you drafted a quarterback pretty early, like a Pat Mahomes, and for some reason Rodgers was there and you took him in like round 9. I mean, people draft weird. I guess there's a situation where Rodgers maybe isn't your starter every week, like Sarge has Herbert. But I know he got Rodgers in a trade, though, so he didn't draft both of them. So he's a little bit of a different situation there. But, okay, going through some more stuff here then. Pat Mahomes, who we just brought up, also dealing with, he got out of concussion protocol. That looked really bad, by the way. Like,
terrible.
His upper body's still up and someone just coming and plowing into his head. I mean, I'm like, did this dude just break his neck? Like, it looked pretty bad, but things look okay there from a health standpoint. But what's going on with Pat Mahomes? Leading the league now in turnovers. Are we worried about him going forward? For me personally, before I let you guys answer, I just think he's really overcompensating now for a bad defense. Like, my concern isn't with Patrick Mahomes. It's pretty much with everything surrounding him. That offensive line, which, Creed Humphrey grades out as like the best center. They went and got Orlando Brown Jr. Just collectively, they haven't been as good as I think people thought they would be. And it's going to take time for them to gel because they haven't played together. But yeah, it's just not a good situation there right now.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, you look at the dynamic of their offense. They're known to be this high prolific, like high scoring offense, and they do that. They do get the points, but there's a lot of mistakes that are coming from that. I think that maybe he's gotten to his head a little bit, and he is trying to overcompensate. It seems like he doesn't want to do the check down passes or take like the easy yards. He's always looking for the big play, always trying to wait that extra little bit, and it's starting to cost him. He really needs to get back to the basics. He's a great player. One of the best quarterbacks in the game by far, but when you try to do too much, there's other great players in the league that are going to step up and take that. So I'm not worried about him. He's going to put up the points, but I don't think he's going to be like the top 3 QB that we are expecting him to be going into the season.
Yeah, we have him at 4 this week, by the way. But go ahead, Drew.
He's still ranked in the top 3 right now.
Yeah.
My problem with him is it looks like he's just trying to play hero. Like, he's just back there again, pressured like crazy and just throwing it up there. He had that one pick 2 weeks ago where he wasn't even looking. He just like went like this and went right to a lineman. It was just ridiculous. But in terms of his health, I would still keep watching that because concussions are a nonlinear injury. It could pop up tomorrow that he'll have.
Look at this guy, nonlinear. Wow.
Oh, yeah. So tomorrow and Thursday, I'd feel good about it, but concussions are really weird. He can get symptoms just out of nowhere. He'll just get a headache, and all of a sudden he pops up on the report with a concussion. So I would just wait it out one more day. I still think he's going to be okay, but you should still keep watching that. Don't just assume come Sunday he's going to be fine. Just like when Darren Waller just came out of nowhere on Sunday with his ankle injury, where did you see how he got hurt? He legit tripped over one of his teammates who was like on the ground stretching. And
I didn't see that at all.
But just watch it. We'll see Sunday. I still think he'll be good, but just be careful.
So right now, Mahomes is 7th, and he's 9 points behind Tom Brady, who's 3rd. So like the 3 through 7 is like very tight. It's like a 9-point gap between all of those teams.
Yeah, in my league, they have 6-point touchdowns. So that's what I was going off of.
Oh, wait, you know what? No, that's all players. He's 7th of all players out of QBs. 1, 2, 3, 4. He's 5th.
Okay. Another quarterback here, actually my fantasy quarterback, coming off the bye, he did get injured throwing a touchdown in overtime the previous week. Dak Prescott, what have we heard about him? Do we expect Dak Prescott at full strength for that Cowboys offense this upcoming week?
Yeah, Jerry Jones already came out saying that they expect him to play. He's full of shit all the time, but I trust him. He's walking around barefoot. He doesn't even have the boot anymore.
Why does Jerry Jones get a ricochet shot here?
Because he's full of shit. Like, I don't know. Shit all the time.
We do have Dak Prescott is in our top 10 rankings as well, tied at number 6 with Tom Brady, as you can see. Yeah, when it happened, do you think he would have played last week if they weren't on a bye? That's the question I think that really needs to be answered. Not that it matters, but I think that's how you gauge like the severity of what this is.
Yeah, it's hard
I think
to
he
tell.
would have.
There was no practice time, but he also wasn't able to walk off the field after the touchdown. It looked like it was pretty bad. So we would have had to see how he reacted.
But you, Dr. Drew, put everybody's mind to rest talking about that boot, what exactly he was put on his foot for, the precaution.
Right.
So yeah, I think, everybody, all Dak Prescott owners, me alike, were able to just breathe a sigh of relief after watching this specific show.
Yeah,
as everybody does.
Say it's interesting. I think a lot of it has to do with matchups, but Minnesota's only given up 12 points a game in the last 3 weeks to quarterbacks. Granted, they've played Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, which obviously we know are the top 3 quarterbacks in the league. I think we got to temper expectations. He's probably like 80, 90%, but that's plenty enough with the offense that they have. They should be okay.
I want to kind of just lump these 3 into. I'm guessing there's a little bit of a delay there for Dr. Drew at this point. Drew, I want to ask you about these 3 running backs all collectively. It sounds like one of these guys is definitely going to come back against the Steelers, and that's Nick Chubb. But the other 2 leaving with injuries, Josh Jacobs, Miles Sanders. What are the fantasy implications of that? And is there a running back to own in those backfields should those guys not be able to go?
So we'll start with Josh Jacobs. He has a chest injury. It doesn't look like it's that bad, but Josh Jacobs, if you look back in his career, he tends to be banged up basically every year, and he just plays through it. But the thing that I'm looking at in that backfield is that it looks like they like Kenyon Drake. I said it last week. I just felt like he was getting more touches, and I think that this is going to come closer to a committee approach. I do think Jacobs plays, but I think Drake's going to get more touches than what fantasy owners would like, and they might kind of make that an annoying back.
Do they actually like Kenyon Drake, or do they just remember how much they paid him in free agency before the season started?
So here's what we look at from the snap counts from this past week. 2 weeks ago, Kenyon Drake only got 6 touches, and it was I don't know. I'm not really buying it. I think the one caveat that we need to put on all of this, because Kenyon Drake was a drop candidate for me 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was
Peyton Barber was out snapping him.
Right. But the thing is that the head coach got fired. So Gruden's gone. You have a new scheme in. Not that the offense is fundamentally different, but someone else might say, hey, I like Drake. Get him in the game. And we saw that. He played 39% of snaps, and he had 17 touches. He had 79 yards of total offense. So that's very different from what we saw in the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. So to me, it's if Drake is out there, you got to consider it. I would imagine that Barber would still cycle in if Josh Jacobs doesn't play, but it seems that Drake has carved out more of a role that he had under Gruden. So
Barber has a quad injury too. He was inactive last week due to that injury. So I don't know if it was a serious injury or they had him as a healthy scratch, or they were just he was on the questionable side and they just took the less risky route and had him sit. But if he actually has a significant quad injury, I think Drake can get a big workload. But I do think that Jacobs is going to play, so I'm not too worried about it. It's just he's banged up, so he might be like an Antonio Gibson risky type of play because he could get halfway through the game, take another shot, and then he's out again.
Well, the nice thing too is that the Raiders are on bye this week, so you can kind of monitor next week, see how he practices, do all that stuff. So it's not something that is for this week. But if Kenyon Drake is available, especially knowing that he's on bye. That's like a great stash after waivers clear Wednesday morning. Right. You say, hey, like this is somebody that I can pick up, potentially plug in and play against the Giants in week 9.
Now, what do you guys think about Miles Sanders? Because, well, one, the usage hasn't been there anyway in Philadelphia's offense. 2, look at the role that Kenneth Gainwell has started to carve out there. 3, Kenneth Gainwell has experience. I know that he's been used primarily just as a pass catcher, but if you remember back in his days at Memphis, he is literally the reason that Antonio Gibson was converted to just a receiver at Memphis, was because he was the between the tackles runner in college. And now look at Antonio Gibson. That kind of has reversed roles, at least for the early portion of the NFL careers there. But what do we make of this Miles Sanders injury? And is Kenneth Gainwell somewhere near a top priority ad in the waiver wire?
For me, he's not. So I live closer to the Philadelphia area than I do in Pittsburgh.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So the rumor here is that Jordan Howard is going to be the guy. So I'm staying far away from that backfield as possible, because they're just going to have a weird split between Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, and Jordan Howard. The only way that I am starting Kenneth Gainwell is if I see a matchup where I think that they're going to be in a game where they have a game script where they're going to be passing it a lot, or if
who are they going to be ever playing where you're expecting they're not going to have a negative game script?
Who do they got this week? Actually,
this week they are playing Detroit, so maybe this week.
Son of a! All right, bad example.
Yeah.
But
it's going to be interesting for sure. It's a mess. And what's funny is that Sanders actually came out pretty hot to start the game. And then naturally,
they were up 7-0 when he left.
He got hurt.
Look what happened that game. This is a good segue, I feel like, because the Nick Chubb injury, they were saying that they do expect him to come back, but look at what Dearness Johnson did on Thursday night against the Broncos. Drew, you wanted to bring up the Browns backfield going forward, because we know Kareem Hunt's not going to be around for a few weeks. Has Dearness Johnson earned more playing time? We already saw that Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt split. I don't know that he's going to get as many touches as Kareem Hunt did in that backfield, but has Dearness Johnson carved out a role for himself, at least until Kareem Hunt comes back?
I think he did, absolutely. And not only is it he played really well last week, Nick Chubb's calf injury is still kind of serious. He's been struggling with it. So I think that they're going to want to take the load off of him and give Dearness Johnson some of that Kareem Hunt role. That way Nick Chubb can kind of ease his way back into things. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's clear that they don't trust Demetric Felton as much as we thought that they did. He only got 2 carries. He had 3 targets. So he's really more of a gadget player. He's not the receiving back option. So negative point for me on that one, because I thought he was going to have a nice game last week. But yeah, Johnson's absolutely carved out a role. They are a better version of what the 49ers could be in terms of running the ball. It's they have their guy, they give him the work, but then they also spell them with other players and give those players opportunities. What a great story for Johnson, though. I mean, dude came out of nowhere, was asking people in the AFL for spots through Instagram
2 years ago.
And now he has this huge 168 total yards game. So you couldn't be happier for a story like that.
I'm thrilled that a Browns player. No, I'm kidding.
But very, very unhappy that Nick Chubb could be back, because that's gonna be tough for the Steelers to handle. But yeah, I think until Hunt comes back, that'd be interesting. I don't know how much of a pass catcher Johnson is, but I think he will get some of that work. They usually do the every other drive kind of thing with their players. So I think that they'll maintain that. And maybe we'll see Chubb catching a couple more passes too if he's ready to go.
I'm worried about him this week. I think Chubb's going to go off.
Why would you say that on here?
I don't think so.
Without Alawalu,
there you go. That's better.
Who are they going to throw to? They can stack the box. They're going to make Baker throw the ball, or Keenan.
I don't know, bro. I think he's going to break one.
But that's for another podcast for another day.
Yeah, you guys are ruining the Around the 412 other content. Okay, let's stick with the running back theme then. J.D. Mckissick and Antonio Gibson. This is very interesting. I mean, I feel like I pound the drum every week for a guy like J.D. Mckissick, especially because of the prop bets. However, I'm upset because we did see his receiving prop. I don't know if you guys pay attention to this stuff at all. His receiving prop jumped to 30.5 yards this past week. They finally started to creep up. Yeah, so they're taking notice for sure in Vegas of the stuff that's going on in that backfield. But you look at the splits there in terms of not just touches, but the amount of time these guys spend on the field. Are we worried about Antonio Gibson?
Yes.
I said it last week. I just think that with their defense is so shitty, like they're so bad, they're always going to be a negative game script, always. And they need to sit Antonio Gibson down and just place him on IR. This is getting to the point where it's CMC all over again, where he's battling against himself, and he's just not going to make it through a season like this. They need to sit him down and let him rest that shin. It's getting to the point where it's just when you watch him run, he looks like he has no explosiveness at this point. He's really struggling with that pain management in that shin.
Yeah, I mean, they're middle of the pack in terms of like running the ball, but he just can't stay on the field right now. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, it's a broken leg, whether you want to call it not that big of a break or whatever. It's a fracture.
It's a crack. That's what I was trying to get off. It's a crack.
Listen, that shit is busted up, and it's obviously hurting him. He only played on 42% of snaps on Sunday, and that's 2 weeks in a row he's been under 50%. Usually he's on the 60% side, but they're letting Mckissick rock.
I think that's game script, though. I still think that they're down, so they're throwing the ball.
But they were down the other 5 weeks too, though. You know.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like Philadelphia, there's not going to be many weeks where they are up and they don't have negative game script. But as a JD McKissick owner, I'm completely with you guys and would love to see it happen. Still sticking with the running back trend here. Drew, I'm assuming you're the one that put this in here. Aaron Jones carries seem to be dropping week by week. What's the story there? Is it a non-story? A.J. Dillon, what's going on there?
So last week, they didn't really run the ball that much. I just think that Rodgers was so hot and he was just lighting everybody up. But each week, if you go through it, more carries are leaving Aaron Jones and going to A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon fumbled last week, and I think they took him out early, and that's what really hurt that number last week. But I think that besides this week, I do think Aaron Jones has a huge week this week, especially with Devontae Adams out and Adam Lazard. But going forward, I still think that this is becoming Brown's backfield light.
Yeah, I mean, they really didn't do a whole lot in terms of like who was on the field. Aaron Jones was on the field for 73% of the snaps, but only had 6 carries for 19 yards. He had 5 targets. He caught all 5 for 20 yards. But you didn't draft him in the second round to get 11 touches in the game. A.J. Dillon was on the field for 23% of the snaps, but only touched the ball 4 times. They really focused on the short passing attack. To me, it was like, all right, they didn't want to mess with the Washington front. As bad as their defense has been this year, they still have a pretty formidable front 7. So it's like, all right, let's attack the secondary. And that's what they did all day. I know last week I had Rodgers as my top QB because that matchup was pretty good. And obviously they felt the same about it in terms of their game plan. But I'm very worried about Aaron Jones. I was talking to Eddie Provident the other day about it. And someone was like, hey, like, what would you trade like for Derrick Henry? And they offered it was Aaron Jones and then like Waller. And I was like, no, I wouldn't do that. Like at the beginning of the year, like maybe I probably would have taken that trade. But right now it's like, I don't trust what the Packers are doing. I think like to what Drew said, like they're moving into more of a committee approach. It's not the run the ball till you puke kind of offense that we thought was going to be at the start of the year, or like the Jamal Williams got like a little bit of work for Green Bay, but Jones was the guy. Like it's really becoming like this 50-50 sort of thing. He has the talent that he can bust plays, but Aaron Jones is very much maybe not because of all the injuries and stuff, but to me, like he's putting up the production of like an RB2 right now, which is probably great and for a lot of teams, but
yeah, he can.
So tough.
He can catch the ball too. Maybe with the injuries, the COVID affecting the receiving room. Hey, line him up and have A.J. Dillon as the running back. What do we think? Both guys on the field at the same time.
Aaron Jones is going to go nuts this week. I'm very confident. I would be shocked if he has less than 25 to 30 points. Shocked.
You know, I feel like I picked the wrong week for him to score 2+ touchdowns. I made that bet this past week. Maybe I should have waited till this Thursday.
Place it again. Make it a first-time touchdown scorer too.
Let's talk some receivers here. Joe, I hate to bring it up to you again, but Tyler Lockett, I'm sure, has a lot of people more than just you worried. Are you benching due to the situation at quarterback, Lockett and or DK Metcalf?
Well, as we saw last night, Geno Smith is just.
How do you have an 84-yard touchdown and pass for less than 200 yards in the game?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. And I mean, even just watching the game, you could see receivers getting open. He had time in the pocket, and it's like, I think you're better off having Russ play left-handed or like do something. Like it was a bad look all around.
Mason Rudolph.
I don't think I don't think that I could bench Metcalf. His ability to catch one pass and take it to the house, like it's there, and he can do that off of short routes. Tyler Lockett, like when he's thriving, he's really the deep ball guy that can do all this like different stuff, and then is able to stretch the field because people were so worried about Metcalf. There's no worry about that right now. The running back room is banged up, and Geno Smith is useless. So to me, it's like I'm probably benching Lockett. I would rather get someone who's going to have the 5 or 6 points than the 2 point whatever that he's going to be giving out. Looking at like who they have this week against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a middle of the road team as far of their receiving room. I also am very high on Gerald Everett this week. I think he's going to have a big game against Jacksonville. So what's up with that? He didn't make our rankings, but he came in at number 7 for me this week. But I think Lockett's going to be quiet. I think he's a great buy low candidate if you're in the playoffs. If you think Russ is going to come back in the next couple of weeks, you could probably get him for pennies on the dollar. And I think that he has a much better trajectory back towards like a better finish to the season than someone say like Allen Robinson, who like honestly at this point in redraft, like I probably will drop this week. But Lockett, it's more of the situation surrounding him. Like when Russ comes back, we've seen what he can do. Yes, like he hasn't really done anything since week 2, but he's always been a player that has some bad games, but never to the point of like, oh, you're getting 1 reception for 12 yards.
Yes, he does, dude. Last
year, but that's
like
one game, not every game.
So I benched Tyler Lockett 2 years ago. Like I'm so sick of this 30 or 5. Like you need to have that floor, and he doesn't have that guaranteed floor. So I mean, Metcalf is a must start, and he's continued to be a must start because you saw it last night, obviously, like you said. But Tyler Lockett has always been off my radar because this always happens. And I said it like 4 weeks ago that I was feeling that trend come back. And then he went, what's his high since week 2? 7 points? Mm-hmm. Something like that? Like I just –
Well, the difference is this year it's happening without Russ.
Right. Because from a target perspective, like he gets the volume. It's just like if he's not coming down with the ball, that's fine. It's like I'd
bench him because of his hair, to be honest with you.
Hey, not everybody can look like a blue raspberry fun dip, all right? Like leave them alone.
Tyler Lockett's just annoying. Like he's an annoying fantasy player. I just rather not deal with it. Like that's just how I've always.
Unlike Joe, I do hold fantasy grudges. I had Tyler Lockett last year, and I didn't do it again. Had pretty much every opportunity to draft him and didn't do it. So, but yeah, DK Metcalf's a different story because of exactly last night. I mean, one play could make his entire day. Maybe you have to just temper your expectations. Maybe you look at him as maybe like your wide receiver 2, as opposed to your wide receiver 1, like you were hoping coming in.
Right.
Sticking with wide receiver theme and another pretty high profile name here, Deandre Hopkins. How worried are we that his fantasy value is pretty much solely attached to scoring touchdowns and not necessarily his usage or volume?
See, I took notice of this a couple weeks ago because I have a lot of Kyler Murray. So I was looking into that team. I noticed that, and I think that other people are going to be worried, and that's why I put it on there. I would try to buy low on him. And you can make that argument to someone that says, hey, like, he's scoring a crap ton of touchdowns, but he's not getting the targets because most of them are going to Christian Kirk, and they're spreading the ball around to AJ Green. And I think Zach Ertz, we talked about this last week, I think because of the position that he plays and what he can do, you saw it last week with that long touchdown. I think that they're going to let him run some routes in the middle of the field, and he's going to get some targets. So there's a lot of ball to go around, but DeAndre Hopkins is just too good. So in the long term, I want to think that he's just going to start to take off and get more targets. But it depends on what the ask is going to be if you're going to make a move like that. But I think that you could get a normal wide receiver 2 who's playing like a wide receiver 1 for DeAndre Hopkins. And if you don't think that that's going to sustain for that player, I would definitely look into it. But I'm definitely worried about the fact that he's not getting enough targets.
He's a sell high for me. I don't think it's sustainable. He's not doing something like a Jamar Chase where like he's going out and getting all this stuff and happening. Like dude is averaging 3 less targets per game. He's already played 7 games. He hasn't even cracked 50 targets yet. Like to me, that's very concerning. That's not what I drafted him for. And yeah, he's scoring the touchdowns, but if he doesn't, then he's a 8 to 10 point per week player, which like isn't going to get it done for me. And I think
he's
like
not for over 100 targets yet though. So
well, that's because of the extra game
number. That's still that total number gets it close to me. You have to argue the point and hope that someone else is thinking the way that you're thinking right now, that maybe you can get him on a lower trade. Because do you think Kirk is going to sustain what he's doing? Do you think AJ Green is going to make it the full season without getting a soft tissue injury? Like I still have my doubts in those things. So if I could get him for something lower, I'd consider it. But I did bring that point up because I am nervous about the lack of target share.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is they have 4 receivers that are playing over 50% of the snaps. So it's like, all right, like, what does that mean? Like, I don't think Kingsbury cares. He's just like, all right, throw all 4 out there. Kyler runs around and he's going to throw it to whoever he throws to. Like, I don't have the confidence where it's like last year, I was like, I'm throwing to Hopkins. I'm throwing to Hopkins if he's double covered. I'm throwing it to Hopkins if he has one shoe on. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's where the ball's going. And, like, that's good from a progression standpoint for Murray. But from a fantasy perspective, DeAndre Hopkins is viewed as, like, a top 3 receiver in fantasy football. He is not that this year. And that's okay. He's 29. He's probably beyond, like, his prime as far as, like, his best season. So, to me, it's like if you can sucker someone and say, hey, I've got DeAndre Hopkins. Look, he's a top 10 whatever receiver. And I can go out and, like, say, like, you take Hopkins plus, like, a RB2 and you can get Cooper Kupp. Like, I'd much rather have Cooper Kupp.
You think someone's going to give you Cooper Kupp, though?
If you give them Hopkins plus a piece, like, that's the level of player that I would be shooting for and say, like,
it depends on what that piece is then. I think you can argue either way. If you have Hopkins, you can go out there and see what you can get. But you could also argue to someone who has Hopkins and see if you can buy low.
Yeah,
I know that Joe doesn't necessarily think much about this guy carving out a role, but I'm telling you, Zach Ertz is going to play a role there too.
But even still, I mean, it's not. I think that he has a role, but it's like if they're each getting 5 catches, like who knows whose 5 catches?
No, but this is what I'm saying
like,
as far as like DeAndre Hopkins. I'm saying that that's even more of a case against that target continuing to go up at all.
Right.
Like it goes against first. I understand like maybe his best weeks of production already came, but even like rookie year Rondale Moore, you could make the argument that as the season goes on, he's going to get more action. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things to me that are fighting against DeAndre Hopkins doing more than what he's already done this year.
I'd like to see what his target share is in the red zone, though, because I imagine that's pretty high.
0. What the freaking frick? Stone, hey, you're undefeated, you said, because of this show, right?
We're getting you ahead of
the problem. Yeah, go get Cooper Kupp.
Or what about like someone like Stephon Diggs or like do you think Calvin Ridley's going to bounce back? Like to me, it's like they have a lot more upside there than what Hopkins is giving. The touchdowns aren't going to last forever.
Joe, are you looking up the target share thing? Because I was going to say that's a great segue if we're going to move on.
I'm looking at the red zone targets right now. Yeah,
Diggs is kind of in the same boat that they're spreading the ball around a lot, and his target share is down.
I agree. So DeAndre Hopkins has 11 targets inside of the 20. He has 6 inside the 10. So AJ Green has 8 inside the 20 and then 6 inside the 10. So it's like, to me,
it's the same. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Don't show that to anybody.
But we know AJ Green is going to come into this year and be a stud.
I mean, you did have the top 30. So,
hey, okay. You mentioned Calvin Ridley though. Where we want to wrap up here is Kyle Pitts. Has he overtaken Calvin Ridley as the number 1 option in that passing game in Atlanta based off the last few weeks?
I want to see the target share numbers, but is it just me or does Calvin Ridley seem like he's not in it this year?
Yeah.
I have a lot of shares with him and like he's been meh. No,
yeah, I agree. I mean, Ridley got 10 targets this past week, only caught 426 and had the 1 touchdown. If we're going down the Hopkins route, actually backtrack, I was feeling myself a little bit. Ridley wouldn't be a person that I would be attacking.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're definitely.
Imagine like you're watching this show and you hear somebody say, you hear yourself say that. And the person's like, all right, hold on. Let me know. Hurry up and put this trade offer in.
Yeah.
His phone just blows up with a trade.
But yeah, he definitely seems to be going with something. I think that Ridley is still the number 1 guy, but from their offense, it's like those are the two guys, like, and that's really all that they have. So for me, it's like he's going to continue to get those opportunities. He gets a lot of looks in the red zone too. He hadn't converted them well early on in the season. He had 8 targets last week, but he got 7 for 163. So he's finally starting to catch on a little bit. I think he struggled to get a little bit of rookie waves out of the way. But yeah, he's a must start, obviously. He's really a tight end by designation, but he plays wide receiver. And Gesicki's the same way. They're playing like 90% of snaps in the slot, not even lining up on the line. It's like they're basically getting a wide receiver for free and then paying him only like $8 million a year instead of 15.
Yeah.
So it's
I feel like Calvin Ridley's just getting the harder coverage to beat, and then Kyle Pitts is just getting better targets, better producing targets because he's on softer coverage. And it's something that I'm concerned about the rest of the year, because the better he does, I feel like the more targets he's going to get.
Hey, this is a Pete Pitts week for us. We got him coming in at number 2 on the Fridge Kicker. And yes, Darren Waller and Mark Andrews are on bye this week, so that's going to play into that. But you looked at the last couple of weeks of production for Kyle Pitts, over 300 receiving yards. He's coming on, as we expected. If you were able to buy low on him because of those first few weeks, great for you. I wasn't able to. I tried. But what was I going to say? Oh, dude, when we were talking about all that the Falcons have, it reminded me of that text that you sent in our group this just a couple of days ago. Drew said something about, I have to go do this all Lego Sasha ride or something experiment. And he said, isn't that dude that plays for the Falcons? That Zacharias or whatever.
You had to be there.
Yeah, that's AT412 FF Show inside joke in the group chat. But speaking of the tight ends being on bye weeks, that's 2 of like the top 4 weekly options that you're looking at being on buys. So I put in here some deep tight end options with those guys being on bye. If you guys have any ones that weren't, that's going to get clipped, I can tell. Yeah, I didn't think about this. This is bad on me. But with those 2 being on a bye, who are some options to target that are maybe owned in like 50% or less in their leagues? Joe, I feel like I'm stealing one from you here in Cincinnati. I'll let you say the name. Yeah, he's still only owned in 20% of Yahoo leagues. So, but like Joe Burrow has talked about him. I know that there's a lot of other options in Cincinnati. You can't expect he's going to go and do what he's did against the Ravens every game, but he has 2 weeks like that so far. He also did that to Jacksonville in that Thursday night game. If you're looking for a tight end this week with Andrews and Waller both on bye, I think you should do a lot worse than him.
Yeah, and let's think about that. So when we looked at the sheets last week, Houston, terrible. They played Houston last week, right?
Who did they?
No, Colts. Yeah.
No. The Bengals. Who did the Bengals play last week?
Oh no, they played the Ravens.
Oh, they played the Ravens. Ravens terrible against tight ends. Jacksonville.
I thought you meant before.
Yeah. What am I thinking? I don't know. Not a lot. Jacksonville also terrible against tight ends. And what are we looking at with the Jets this week? The worst team in the league against tight ends. So to me, that's like he doesn't get a lot of targets, but you can tell that Zach Taylor may be smarter than we actually gave him credit for. And they find ways to use him with all those different weapons. And it was almost like, oh yeah, let's do it. So I like it this week. I don't think he's like a rest of season kind of player, but he could definitely make it happen.
Stone has Kyle Pitts and Noah Fant as their tight ends.
I would trade one.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Or at least get through the buys first and then trade him.
Okay, so here's a prime example of that. You have somebody that's weak at tight end that has like that's really strong in a position of need, or even a wide receiver. You say, all right, I'll give you Hopkins, I'll give you Fant, and then boom, you take their best player away from them. In my experience, getting the one player in a 2-for-1 deal, you're always getting the better player, and I always want the best player in the trade.
Yeah.
So to me, that's something that you could leverage in that scenario, or you can just keep talking shit in the chat about how you're undefeated and in spite of me.
I've had to read that same word 4 times already.
Just playing against bots, I bet.
Some other options, though. I think you could look at like a Jared Cook, who's owned in 44% of the leagues. I know we talked about how good New England was against tight ends, but there's just not many other options out there. I mean, Mo Alley Cox is owned in 17% of leagues. You saw him score a touchdown this past week, but you would probably really be relying on him scoring a touchdown to have that production. And then I'm going to bring up a name that nobody wants to hear, Evan Ingram. Owned 31%. But here's the thing is you look at all those injuries in that Giants wide receiving room. The ball's got to go somewhere when they throw it. Evan Ingram, despite not catching the ball a whole lot, has had the targets over the past 2 years. So, again, I think it's just a situation where I'm not thrilled with it, but I think you could do worse.
A guy that I would look at too, he's owned in 60% of leagues, but he was
that's over the threshold.
Yeah, but hear me out. He was faded in a ton of leagues because he's one of the most touchdown dependent tight ends that there is. But with Devontae Adams out and Alan Lazard, Bob Thomas would be a great play this week. And he's available, and I mean he's available in 40%, but every league I'm in he's available. So if you're playing with smarter people, they probably dropped his ass. So
Cardinals are very good against tight ends. So that is just a situation where you're probably looking at quantity over quality, right. Just because of the options that are available to Rodgers on Thursday.
Right.
Another like super deep sleeper that I still feel pretty good about is Dan Arnold in Jacksonville. So they traded for him a couple weeks ago. Trevor Lawrence, his safety valve seems to be the tight end a lot of times. So he's only owned in like 3 or 4% of leagues. So that's one that could
Ricky Seals-Jones is still available in 50% of leagues, which is insane.
And he's getting a lot of targets with Logan Thomas being out. So, I mean, to me, that's somebody that you definitely want to grab if he's available for sure.
I want to bring up this, of course, being that this was just updated today by Joe. So if you guys have not been paying attention to these charts, this is the perfect week to start. If you have been paying attention, here's the latest update in them. As you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory, but let me just go to the last page if you have never seen this before. So this is how you read the chart. Joe, if you want to explain it, it's your chart.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're looking at is fantasy points allowed over the last 3 weeks of a season. So if we're looking at quarterbacks, for example, in the last 3 weeks, the worst team against quarterbacks is going to be the Washington football team, third row down from the top. They're giving 30.3 points per game against from a fantasy football perspective. So if you go to the right, who's playing Washington this week? Teddy Two Gloves. So it's like, all right, if I'm in a streaming situation or if I'm in DFS or if my quarterback's on bye, like, hey, like who are some people that I have suitable replacements for? So the green is going to represent a good matchup. The yellow is kind of like your middle matchup, and the red is going to be like a poor matchup relative to what's happening against the other teams in the league.
Now, Big Ben this week.
Big Ben this week.
That's what I'm saying.
It could happen. It could be the one. He does own Cleveland.
Based off this chart, the perfect DFS play for this week, if our listeners actually play DFS, is Jerry Jeudy. Great matchup, and he's forgotten about coming back from injury.
Baby. The booty is returning.
He's not going to be in a lot of lineups, and that's how you win DFS when you pick players that most people aren't choosing. So he's a perfect DFS play this week if you play.
This is an absurd number, by the way. Miami against receivers. That is astronomically worse than anybody else.
Yes, and that's why I had Stephon Diggs as my number one this week.
Yeah, I might have to change from Cup to Diggs. What are we doing here? This is insane.
I mean, Cup could still be insane too. So
he could, but that's double digit more points than anybody else.
But yeah, so if we're looking at this chart, I mean, you have a lot of really interesting matchups. I mean, looking at like Cincinnati, they have a great matchup against the Jets on the ground as well in the tight end and pretty much everything because the Jets defense is awful. But if you're thinking about, hey, like I have an injury-ridden team, Mixon's obviously not going to be available. Perine might though, and they looked at a 50-50 split last week. So you might be able to get him in there. He's had some action. He's getting some receiving work. So against a bad offense, if you're hurting on a bye week, then boom, go and do that. Go pick up Perine. Or if we're looking at the tight ends, obviously we said Uzama. You're looking at Gerald Everett. That's where that source of, for me, that came from. They're looking pretty locked down against receivers and running backs. Everett could be the big beneficiary there. And then a couple weird ones to point out. So the best offense to play against in fantasy football right now, Kansas City Chiefs, just as we all predicted to start the season. And then the other thing that I'll point out too is that if you remember back earlier on in the season, Tampa Bay couldn't stop a nosebleed. Granted, they've played some pretty awful offenses in the last 3 weeks between Chicago, Philly, and Miami, but we find them back at the bottom of the rankings again, only giving up 15.3 points per game against wide receivers. So this is constantly changing. It's very fluid. And something to keep in mind is that as bye weeks start to happen now, I'm going back and adding that 4th week of data for teams so that you're not looking at 2 games, but we're having 3 for all 32 teams against. So we're looking for some teams going back to week 4 or 5, depending on what we need from the bye week perspective. But this doesn't mean that you should bench, say, like Zeke or Dak Prescott because Minnesota has a good matchup. But it does say, hey, relative to expectations, if we're thinking about that lineup construction, I might want to bank on this better player, probably closer to a floor performance. How can I compensate for that in other spots in my lineup? So this is just a tool. It's not the end-all, be-all, and it doesn't mean that somebody can't break out and have a good game. I mean, we've seen this a bunch of times with Derrick Henry this year. He's played against pretty good defenses like Buffalo, for example. You find them at the bottom of this list, and then he went out and did his thing. But it's a good starting point. You can say, hey, like this is a matchup that I can take advantage of.
Yeah, and before we go, I want to bring up – so the Ravens are on bye week, obviously, this week, but Rashad Bateman had a really good game last week. I'm still worried about long-term with him because I think Sammy Watkins is out, and I still think Hollywood's the guy. But he's on bye. Let him clear waivers and just stash him just in case I'm a dipshit and I'm way off.
Okay.
I was gonna say, just looking at I was joking around, obviously, about Ben, facing Cleveland, who's given up the second most points to quarterbacks. But what I will say is, Deontay Johnson, I think, is a borderline like top 12 to 15 play this week.
Yeah,
don't have him in
my
top 10.
I did.
But really, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
I almost snuck him in at the end. He's always going to be there with his target share.
Yeah. Love it. But this is also, hey, for you guys, so this is PPR, right? But Joe also has half-point PPR and standard here as well. Again, it's color coordinated. It's pretty self-explanatory, but even the last thing of this image that he puts out is how to read the chart. So that is our pinned tweet every Tuesday. It changes to that Tuesday's updated version of it. By the way, shout out to all the new followers. We're at 900 exactly followers after doing the Devin Bush jersey giveaway with around the 412. I'm making it seem like it's like a separate brand. So shout out to all the new followers and hope you guys at least enjoy fantasy football a little bit. If you play yourselves, you can obviously join us every week when we do the show. For anybody that's in here right now, we can't thank you enough for joining. Any closing thoughts, Joe or Drew, as we get very close to the halfway point of this season, by the way?
Yeah, I was going to say we're almost at the halfway point of the season, so that means everything that we thought about at the beginning of drafts, who cares? I don't care what round you drafted these guys in. I don't care whose jersey's in your closet. You got to do what you got to do to keep yourself above 500. 500 is what's going to get you into the playoffs, and anything can happen once you get there. So start thinking about, all right, like if I'm somebody that's 2-5 or 1-6, like what can I do to win this week? You got to start stringing some wins together. We're going to help you get there. So ride it out, keep things going, and let's get some dubs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it, Drew.
Just focus 1 week at a time. Try to get that W because if you can't really start losing at this point, even if I'm 5-2 in a league and I'm still starting to sweat because Devontae Adams is out. So just do whatever you got to do 1 week at a time and stack them.
Hey, I'm in first place right now in a league with Devontae Booker and Chuba Hubbard as my running backs, just as I predicted at the beginning of the year. So, hey, it's a week-by-week game. You can't win on draft day, but you can absolutely lose it with the move or win it with the moves or lose it with the moves that you make along the way. So, again, though, we had a good bit of interaction today in the chat. So, you guys just continue to keep it coming week in and week out. Join us on Twitter at AT412 FF Show. The link to that will be in the bio. He said she was our 900th follower. We were right at 900.
She must have hit it like a 99 followers.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, yeah. So let us know, how your fantasy teams are doing. You can get at us on Twitter always, especially on Sunday mornings with any type of questions. Just make sure it isn't just like, hey, which receiver out of these two would you play? And it's like Cooper Kupp versus somebody else. We're not going to answer that. We don't have time for that.
Although I'll be at the Steelers Browns game, so if I don't,
True.
it's not on purpose.
But all right, guys, thanks so much for joining us this week. For Smitty, for Joe, for Drew, good luck in your matchups this weekend, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Later.